you urged House Republicans to vote in favor of this Epstein release bill they're going to vote on tomorrow. I just want to be super clear on your position. Do you want to see that pass the Senate? Would you sign that bill if it gets to your desk?
I do want to. Here's what I want. We have nothing to do with Epstein. The Democrats do. All of his friends were Democrats. You look at this Reid Hoffman, you look at Larry Summers, Bill Clinton, they went to his island all the time, and many others. They're all Democrats. All I want for people to recognize a great job that I've done on pricing, on affordability, because we brought prices way down, but they're going way lower, on energy, on ending 8 wars, and another one coming pretty soon, I believe. We've done a great job.
Okay, so this story is absolutely explosive, and it connects so many of the different threads we've been tracking throughout these videos over the past several weeks and months into one devastating and comprehensive picture of presidential corruption, systematic cover-up, and potential criminal conspiracy that goes directly to the very heart of the Epstein scandal that has haunted wealthy and powerful people across politics, business, entertainment, and finance for years now, and that many millions of Americans across the entire political spectrum, from the far left to the far right, genuinely believe involves a massive and ongoing coordinated effort at the highest levels of power to protect the guilty parties from ever facing any meaningful accountability whatsoever for their involvement in truly horrific crimes against vulnerable young people. Leaked documents have now emerged and revealed that President Donald Trump personally signed a batch of extraordinarily controversial and legally questionable pardons at 3 o'clock in the morning on November 12, 2025, deliberately and consciously choosing the absolute dead of night when no journalists were watching, when no news cycles were running, and when the American people were asleep in their beds to slip these highly problematic pardons through without any public notice whatsoever, without any media scrutiny of who exactly was being pardoned and why they deserved such extraordinary presidential mercy, and without following any of the normal and well-established Department of Justice protocols and procedures that exist specifically to ensure that the awesome and constitutionally unreviewable presidential pardon power is used responsibly, transparently, and for legitimate purposes of mercy and justice, rather than as a corrupt tool for covering up serious crimes and protecting political allies and co-conspirators from the legal accountability they rightfully deserve for their conduct. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
At a lot of inconvenience. So I'm for any, I don't, they can do whatever they want. We'll give them everything. Sure, I would. Let the Senate look at it. Let anybody look at it. But don't talk about it too much, because honestly, I don't want to take it away from us. It's really a Democrat problem. The Democrats were Epstein's friends, all of them. And it's a hoax. The whole thing is a hoax. And I don't want to take it away from really the greatness of what the Republican Party has accomplished over the last period of time.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.
The recipients of these secret 3 a.m. pardons reportedly include multiple allies and associates with documented connections to Jeffrey Epstein's extensive network of powerful associates, enablers, and participants, as well as absolutely central key figures from Trump's 2020 election overthrow schemes, including his longtime personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, who spearheaded and led the pressure campaigns against state legislators and election officials, his White House chief of staff, Mark Meadows, who coordinated the overall effort from inside the West Wing, conservative lawyer John Eastman, who authored the legal memos purporting to justify the scheme to have Vice President Pence reject certified electoral votes, and lawyer Sidney Powell, who promoted increasingly wild and defamatory conspiracy theories about election fraud in courts across the country, all individuals who were facing extremely serious criminal exposure for their respective roles in attempting to overturn the legitimate certified results of the 2020 presidential election and obstruct the peaceful transfer of power that is fundamental to American constitutional democracy, and who now have been quietly and secretly shielded from any meaningful accountability whatsoever through pardons signed in the middle of the night while the rest of America was sleeping and completely unaware of what their president was doing in the darkness of the early morning hours when he thought nobody would be watching or paying attention. The specific timing of these pardons at 3 o'clock in the morning Eastern Time tells you absolutely everything you need to know about Trump's consciousness of guilt regarding these particular pardons and his very clear understanding that these pardons would be universally seen as deeply corrupt, completely indefensible by any reasonable standard if they receive proper public scrutiny and attention from journalists, legal experts, ethics watchdogs, and the American people who have every legitimate right to know when and why their president is exercising the extraordinary constitutional power to forgive federal crimes and completely wipe away criminal accountability for potentially serious offenses. Presidents of the United States simply do not sign pardons at 3 o'clock in the morning because that just happens to be when they finally got around to catching up on routine paperwork, or because their schedule was simply too busy during normal working hours to fit in a few signatures. Presidents sign pardons at 3 a.m. specifically and deliberately and with full awareness of what they're doing because they want to completely avoid public scrutiny, avoid difficult and probing questions from reporters who would naturally ask why these particular individuals deserve pardons, avoid the normal news cycle that would cover such significant and consequential presidential actions, and create a fait accompli that absolutely cannot be stopped, challenged, or reversed once it's been completed and the pardons have been formally granted and become part of the permanent legal record. The leaked documents reveal that these 3 a.m. pardons completely and totally bypass the normal DOJ office of the pardon attorney process that exists specifically to carefully vet pardon applications, thoroughly investigate the backgrounds and complete circumstances of potential pardon recipients, professionally assess whether pardons are actually warranted based on the specific facts and circumstances of each individual case using established criteria, and create proper official documentation and justification for the exercise of this extraordinary and constitutionally unreviewable power that the founders granted to presidents with the expectation it would be used for legitimate purposes of mercy, justice, and the public good, rather than for corrupt self-dealing and protection of criminal allies. Absolutely none of that normal and expected vetting and documentation happened with these 3 a.m. pardons, according to the leaked documents that have now emerged. There was no DOJ review whatsoever of the pardon applications or the individuals involved. There was no investigation of the backgrounds, criminal histories, or circumstances of the recipients to assess whether they deserve such extraordinary mercy. There was no documentation whatsoever of the reasoning or justification behind the pardons. There was no written explanation of why these particular individuals deserve to have their potential or actual federal crimes forgiven by presidential decree, when thousands of other pardon applicants go through lengthy review processes and most are ultimately denied. Trump simply signed pardons for specific people he wanted to protect for reasons he clearly didn't want documented or explained, and he did it in the middle of the night at 3 o'clock in the morning when he calculated that nobody would notice until it was already too late for anyone to do anything about it, raise objections before the pardons became final, or mount any kind of public pressure campaign to stop the pardons from going through. The connection of these pardons to the broader Epstein scandal takes this story from being merely about corrupt pardons, which would be bad enough entirely on its own merits and would justify serious investigation and potential impeachment charges, to something potentially far more sinister and far more explosive in its implications for understanding what is really happening at the highest levels of power in America regarding the systematic protection of powerful people from accountability for their involvement with Jeffrey Epstein and his criminal network. The leaked documents reportedly identify pardon recipients who have documented connections to Jeffrey Epstein's extensive network of wealthy and powerful associates, enablers, and participants. People who may have direct personal knowledge of Epstein's crimes and the involvement of other powerful people. People who may themselves have been involved in Epstein's activities in ways that would expose them to serious criminal liability. And people who may have been pardoned specifically, deliberately to ensure their continued silence and ongoing cooperation with cover-up efforts designed to make absolutely sure that certain powerful names never become public knowledge and that certain powerful people never face any accountability whatsoever for whatever they may have done in connection with Epstein's horrific crimes against young girls. All right, so let's really dig into what these leaked documents actually reveal in specific and comprehensive detail, who exactly the pardon recipients are, and what their specific connections to Epstein and the 2020 election schemes might be based on what we currently know, why the 3 a.m. timing and the complete bypassing of all normal DOJ processes is so significant and so revealing of corrupt intent, and how all of this connects to the broader Epstein scandal and apparent systematic cover-up that increasingly appears to reach into the very highest levels of power in the American government and throughout the networks of wealth and influence that surround and support that government. The leaked documents that have emerged and that are now being carefully analyzed by journalists, researchers, and investigators across multiple organizations reportedly show that on November 12, 2025, at approximately 3 o'clock in the morning Eastern Time, President Donald Trump personally signed a series of highly controversial pardons for specific individuals who were facing serious criminal exposure from various ongoing and potential investigations and prosecutions related to both the Epstein scandal and the 2020 election schemes that sought to overturn the legitimate results of that presidential election. The timing is extraordinary and essentially unprecedented in modern American presidential history. While presidents have occasionally signed documents late at night or very early in the morning during genuine crises requiring immediate presidential action, or at the very end of their terms when they're racing against the clock before their constitutional authority expires at noon on January 20th, there is absolutely no legitimate reason whatsoever for a sitting president with years remaining in his term to sign routine pardons at 3 o'clock in the morning unless he is deliberately and consciously trying to avoid public scrutiny, avoid media coverage, avoid difficult questions, and slip the pardons through without anyone in the press or the public noticing until it's already too late for anything to be done about it and the pardons have become final, irreversible exercises of constitutional authority that cannot be challenged or undone, regardless of how corrupt or unjustified they might be. The pardon recipients reportedly include several absolutely central major figures from Trump's 2020 election schemes who have faced or were facing extremely serious criminal charges and potential prosecutions in multiple jurisdictions for their various roles in attempting to overturn the legitimate certified election results and obstruct the peaceful transfer of power to the incoming Biden administration that the American voters had chosen. Rudy Giuliani, who served as Trump's personal lawyer throughout the post-election period and who personally led the effort to pressure state legislatures and state election officials to reject their properly certified election results and substitute fake slates of Trump electors, was reportedly among those pardoned in the secret 3 a.m. batch of pardons. Giuliani has faced numerous serious criminal charges in multiple states, including Georgia and Arizona, as well as massive civil judgments totaling hundreds of millions of dollars for defamation related to his knowingly false election fraud claims against election workers and voting machine companies, and a presidential pardon would shield him from any federal criminal exposure, though it would not protect him from state criminal charges or civil liability, which are beyond the president's pardon power. Mark Meadows, who served as Trump's White House chief of staff during the critical post-election period in the January 6th attack on the Capitol, and who has been directly implicated in multiple aspects of the January 6 schemes through extensive testimony, documentary evidence, text messages, and recorded conversations, was also reportedly included among the pardon recipients according to the leaked documents. Meadows notably provided detailed testimony against Trump under an immunity agreement with federal prosecutors, describing Trump's state of mind, his direct involvement in the schemes, and his reactions as the violence unfolded on January 6th. Pardoning Meadows now raises extremely serious questions about what exactly Trump is trying to accomplish with respect to Meadows' future testimony and potential cooperation with ongoing investigations. Is Trump rewarding Meadows for limiting his testimony despite the immunity agreement, signaling that future loyalty will be rewarded, or attempting to give Meadows the freedom to recant or modify his statements without fear of prosecution for making false statements? John Eastman, the conservative lawyer who authored the notorious legal memos arguing that Vice President Mike Pence had the constitutional authority to unilaterally reject certified electoral votes from states that Biden won and thereby hand the election to Trump despite the actual vote counts and the will of the American people as expressed through their votes, was reportedly pardoned as well, according to the leaked documents. Eastman faced serious criminal charges in Georgia related to the fake elector scheme and potential federal exposure for his absolutely central role in developing the legal theories and strategies that were used to justify the January 6th scheme to block certification of Biden's legitimate victory. Sidney Powell, the lawyer who promoted increasingly wild and unsupported conspiracy theories about election fraud involving foreign countries, secret algorithms, bamboo ballots, and voting machine manipulation, and who faced court sanctions, potential criminal exposure in multiple jurisdictions, and bar discipline proceedings for her unprofessional and dishonest conduct, was reportedly on the pardon list as well. These pardons for 2020 election figures will be deeply controversial and arguably corrupt entirely on their own merits, even without any connection to the Epstein scandal, representing Trump using his constitutional pardon power to shield his own personal co-conspirators from any accountability whatsoever for their roles in attempting to overturn a legitimate democratic election and obstruct the peaceful transfer of power that has been the hallmark of American democracy for over 2 centuries. But the leaked documents reportedly go significantly further than just the election figures, identifying additional pardon recipients with documented connections to Jeffrey Epstein and his extensive network of wealthy and powerful associates, enablers, fixers, and participants who surrounded him for decades and who benefited from their associations with him in various ways throughout the many years of his criminal activities targeting vulnerable young girls. The specific names of these Epstein-connected pardon recipients and the precise nature of their connections to Epstein and his network are still being actively investigated, verified, and confirmed by journalists, researchers, and investigators who are working through the leaked documents and cross-referencing the information against known associates of Epstein and individuals who have appeared in various Epstein-related proceedings, depositions, and document releases over the years. But the implications of what the leaked documents reportedly show are absolutely extraordinary if the reports prove accurate upon further investigation and verification. If Donald Trump is using his constitutional pardon power to protect people who are connected to the Epstein scandal from any criminal accountability whatsoever, that would strongly suggest the existence of a coordinated cover-up effort at the very highest levels of the American government, specifically designed to ensure that the full truth about Epstein's activities and the involvement of powerful people in those activities never fully comes out, and that certain powerful names remain permanently protected from exposure and accountability, no matter what evidence might exist against them and no matter how serious their involvement might have been. The complete and total bypassing of all normal DOJ pardon processes is itself a major scandal, entirely separate from and in addition to the question of who specifically received these pardons, because it reveals the corrupt intent behind these particular pardons and demonstrates conclusively that Trump knew these pardons would never survive proper scrutiny and vetting through established legitimate channels. So let's break this down into what you really need to understand about these leaked documents and what they mean for Trump personally, for the Epstein scandal that continues to unfold and expand, and for the broader fundamental questions of accountability, justice, and corruption that are central to everything we've been covering throughout these videos over recent months. First major point that everyone watching this needs to understand with absolute clarity: the 3 a.m. timing of these pardons is itself powerful and essentially conclusive evidence of corrupt intent on Trump's part, because there is absolutely no legitimate reason whatsoever for a president of the United States to sign pardons in the middle of the night unless he is deliberately and consciously trying to avoid public scrutiny, avoid media attention, avoid the normal news cycle, and slip the pardons through without anyone noticing or having the opportunity to object until it's already too late for objections to matter, because the pardons have already been signed, granted, and become final. Presidents of the United States have enormous staffs of literally hundreds of people working for them and can schedule document signings at absolutely any time that's convenient for their busy schedules throughout the day. If these were legitimate pardons based on proper process, thorough vetting, and sound reasoning that could easily withstand public scrutiny and be defended on the merits, they would have been signed during normal business hours when staff are present and proper processes can be documented and followed, announced through normal official White House communications channels that inform the press and public about presidential actions, and defended publicly with clear and compelling justifications explaining exactly why each recipient deserved the extraordinary mercy of a presidential pardon based on factors like rehabilitation, time served, acceptance of responsibility, or other legitimate considerations. The deliberate and conscious choice to sign these pardons at 3 o'clock in the morning tells you that Trump himself fully knew and understood that these pardons would be universally seen as corrupt and completely indefensible by the public, the press, legal experts, and ethics watchdogs once they became known, that he wanted to minimize the time between signing and public awareness so that by the time anyone found out about the pardons, they would already be final, irreversible, and beyond challenge, and that he hoped to create a fait accompli that couldn't be challenged, stopped, reversed, or undone once it was accomplished in the darkness before dawn while America slept unaware. This is absolutely classic consciousness of guilt. The timing itself is powerful evidence that Trump knew he was doing something wrong, something corrupt, something that could not survive public scrutiny, and he wanted to hide it as long as possible, precisely because he knew it could not be defended on the merits. Second major point, the connection between these pardons and the Epstein scandal represents potentially the most explosive and deeply consequential aspect of this entire leak, because it suggests the existence of coordinated cover-up efforts at the very highest levels of the American government to systematically protect people connected to one of the most horrific criminal enterprises in modern American history from ever facing any accountability whatsoever for their involvement in crimes against children. Jeffrey Epstein's network involved the systematic sexual exploitation and trafficking of young girls over many years, with victims who numbered in the dozens at minimum, and potentially many more who have never come forward or been identified. The full scope of exactly who among the wealthy and powerful was involved in Epstein's activities, what exactly they did, and what they knew about the exploitation occurring around them has never been publicly revealed despite years of investigations, prosecutions, civil litigation, journalistic inquiry, and public demands for transparency and accountability from across the entire political spectrum. Third major point, the pardoning of 2020 election figures like Giuliani, Meadows, Eastman, and Powell represents Trump using his constitutional pardon power to protect and reward his own personal co-conspirators and shield them from any accountability whatsoever for their roles in attempting to overturn a legitimate democratic election and obstruct the peaceful transfer of power that is fundamental to American constitutional government and that distinguishes democracies from authoritarian regimes. These aren't peripheral figures who merely happen to support Trump's election fraud claims from the sidelines or who expressed opinions sympathetic to his cause. They were absolutely central architects, strategists, and implementers of the specific schemes designed to pressure states into rejecting their certified results, to create and submit fake slates of Trump electors, to convince Vice President Pence to reject legitimate electoral votes during the January 6th joint session, and ultimately to use the violence and chaos of January 6th to block the certification of Biden's legitimate victory and keep Trump in power despite losing the election. Fourth major point, this leak adds to the already overwhelming and ever-growing body of evidence of obstruction and corruption that forms the basis for the impeachment articles Representative Al Green is pushing, and that demonstrates a systematic ongoing pattern of using presidential power for corrupt self-dealing, protection of criminal allies, and cover-up of serious crimes rather than for the public interest the president is constitutionally sworn to serve. The 3 a.m. pardons aren't an isolated incident or a one-time lapse in judgment. They're part of a comprehensive and deeply troubling pattern that includes the DOJ compensation scheme, where Trump tried to have the government pay him personally $230 million, the repeated defiance of court orders by Bondi and Patel, the evidence destruction allegations at the DOJ, the systematic politicization of prosecutorial decisions, the slush fund payments to political allies like Flynn and the Babbitt family, and all the other abuses of power we've been documenting throughout these videos. So, where does this leave us as we process the full implications of this explosive leak? We have leaked documents showing Trump signed pardons at 3 a.m. on November 12, 2025, specifically to avoid any public scrutiny. We have Epstein-connected individuals and 2020 election co-conspirators among the pardon recipients. We have complete and total bypassing of all normal DOJ pardon processes with no documentation or justification whatsoever. We have a White House response that denies the authenticity of the documents without specifically refuting any of the details they contain. We have this revelation dropping right amid the broader Epstein file scandal, with Patel facing contempt for refusing to produce documents. We have clear connections to the impeachment articles and the entire cascade of other scandals we've been tracking. And we have growing bipartisan demands for immediate investigation into what these pardons mean and who exactly they're designed to protect. The 3 a.m. pardons represent Trump at his most corrupt and most desperate, using the awesome and unreviewable power of the American presidency in the dead of night when he thought nobody was watching to protect allies, cover up scandals, obstruct justice, and ensure that accountability never reaches certain powerful people for crimes that may include the exploitation of children by wealthy and powerful predators who expect to be protected by other powerful people. If these leaked documents are authentic, and the White House's non-specific denials suggest they very well may be, they show a president who is not just corrupt in ordinary political ways, but who is willing to use the highest powers of his office to cover up some of the most serious and disturbing crimes imaginable. Keep watching, because investigations into these pardons are just beginning, and significantly more information will emerge in the days and weeks ahead as journalists and investigators dig deeper into the leaked documents and their implications. The connection to the Epstein scandal ensures that this story will not fade away quietly, because the public demand for accountability in that case transcends normal partisan divisions and unites Americans across the political spectrum who want to know the truth about what happened, who was involved, and why so many powerful people seem so desperate to keep that truth from ever coming out. Stay tuned, because this may ultimately be the scandal that finally breaks through in ways that even Trump's most loyal and devoted supporters simply cannot ignore, dismiss, or excuse away.